Athens, London, Moscow, wherever politicians gather for business, banquets, backslapping, or bonhomie, there you'll find Gough Whitlam on an international passport to political pleasure.
It was that problem of style again, magnified when Whitlam returned by a national ALP conference held at the beachside town of Terrigal on the New South Wales Central Coast. The business of the conference was serious enough, but what voters saw on television and in newspaper and magazine photographs contributed to a public perception of Labor as a party of junketeers, a phrase coined by David Coombs several months later in a report to the ALP's national executive.
We got to the stage where we were looking self-indulgent. We were constantly the butt of scandal and crisis.
It wasn't quite a scandal or a crisis, but the Jim and Junie affair gave a kick along to that junketeering image. Dr. Jim Cairns, darling of Labor's left wing, had displaced Lance Barnard as Deputy Prime Minister after the 1974 election. He'd taken over the crucial Treasury portfolio from Frank Crean 6 months later. Then he appointed Junie Morosi, a lady with no public service experience, to run his office, and the resulting controversy hurt his reputation and undermined his support in the ALP. Meanwhile, the loans affair was becoming more and more farcical. Kemlani, claiming to have access to people in the Middle East with vast sums of petrodollars to lend, kept reporting that he was on the point of finalising the loan. But his telex messages were full of excuses for delays, and when cheques were made with overseas banks he claimed to be using, they denied knowledge of any loan deal. In early 1975, those of us who work here in Parliament House often used to notice those lights in the office of the Minister for Minerals and Energy burning into the early hours of the morning. There was speculation about what was going on in there so late, but none of it came anywhere near the truth. That old Rex Connor was in there, sometimes staying all night, keeping a lonely vigil by his telex machine, waiting in vain for it to begin clacking out the message that the money had finally come through. But ironically, it was Treasury's own minister, Cairns, not Connor, who became the first political casualty of the loans affair. Ignoring warnings from his department about the use of intermediaries, Cairns authorised a Melbourne businessman, George Harris, to seek loan funds for the Australian government. Cairns had kept his dealings with Harris secret from Whitlam and other ministers. As soon as Whitlam learned about them and was told of legal advice that Cairns had entered an agency relationship with Harris, Cairns' removal as Treasurer was inevitable. On the 5th of June, he was shunted off to the Environment portfolio, and Bill Hayden became the third Treasurer in 2.5 years. The same reshuffle saw the departure of Lance Barnard to a diplomatic post. The Liberals poured everything into the by-election for Barnard's seat of Bass in Tasmania, and the result was an incredible 17% swing against Labor.
I don't believe that without Bass, Fraser would have had the courage to pull on the refusal of supply. I believe that Bass was a crucial turning point for Malcolm Fraser.
For the Labor government, things were now moving towards a climax. The Deputy Prime Minister was about to be dismissed from Cabinet. In Parliament on the 4th of June, in response to a question from Deputy Opposition Leader Philip Lynch, Cairns had denied categorically that he'd signed a letter offering a 2.5% commission to a loan-raising intermediary. 6 days later, the Australian Embassy in Washington cabled to Canberra the text of just such a letter, which had turned up in New York.
I have no comment to make.
Can you tell us anything about your political future, sir?
No, I can't. Can you?
The great difference between Mr. Connor and Dr. Cairns is that Mr. Connor was authorised to pursue inquiries and took advice on any responses he had, and was in general consulting with his colleagues. Dr. Cairns was not authorised, did not consult.
By now, to Fraser, Lynch and other opposition strategists, the option of blocking the forthcoming budget in the Senate to force an election was looking almost irresistibly attractive. Preparation of that budget was in the hands of a new Treasurer who, like other ministers, was showing signs of stress as a result of the loans affair.
Mr. Hayden, we understand. Well, I'm just not doing that. I told you I'm not available. That's terrible. That really is terrible. Sorry,
But to the enormous surprise of the coalition, Hayden produced a steady, responsible budget.
We were on the way back.
What went wrong?
One word. Cur.
Well, not quite. What went wrong first was Connor. In early October, Tirith Kemlani flew into Australia with 9 briefcases packed with files and spent a weekend closeted with executives of the Melbourne Herald newspaper.
Kemlani will prove by the documents that the government have complete knowledge of the whole loans negotiations right from the
answer that question. Can you answer?
On Monday, October the 13th, the Herald appeared with 2 telex messages reproduced on the front page. One from Kemlani to Connor about a likely new loan source, and the other Connor's reply. Both were dated May the 23rd. It was the end of the strangler. He'd told Parliament that all contact with Kemlani over loans had ended on May the 20th. Connor's resignation came in the very week the budget was due to be voted on in the Senate.
The opposition now has no choice. We will use the power vested in us by the Constitution and delay the passage of the government's money bills through the Senate until the Parliament goes to the people.